did with the bottle. You don't got to be real long about it. Just what the show's about, that kind of thing.
Okay, you want to do that?
No, you don't like to do it?
I don't like to.
No, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah, 'cause you're
Got a
better. Well,
feeling.
I mean that's kind of your
Yeah, you've been buying too many watches, buddy. Okay.
yeah yeah.
Are we rolling?
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. Here we are again, Tuesday morning on the Bottled Business Sense Show. I am here with my co-host, Bill Bernard. How are you doing, Bill?
Doing great, Rick. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be back for another great show here at Bottle Business and Studios. We're in our two sister studios today. Looking forward to speaking with you about an issue I think people should be aware of, and that small business owners oftentimes aren't aware of, and that really has to do, Rick, with making legal missteps in their business. The common ones that people should avoid, but normally, well, I shouldn't say normally, but oftentimes do not avoid. And I think we need to point some of those out today.
Okay.
But before we get started, again, our show is premised, as we always say, on this ship in a bottle. That's our logo. The bottle stands for protection. Your business is inside that bottle. And it moves forward by using sound marketing principles, content marketing, videos, all kinds of marketing tools that help your business prosper, and that is largely due in part with because of Rick's expertise and what he shares with us on the show. But today, we're going to speak about small business legal missteps. And this is going to be a pretty succinct show because these are 5 points that I picked out that I think oftentimes are committed by business owners because they don't want to, maybe they've got an issue about spending some additional cash or money, or maybe they feel like they can run the business totally on their own. Maybe they feel like they can trust people. All of these things, believe it or not, can have very negative connotations if you're a small business owner, especially if you're a small business owner who's just starting out.
Yeah, yeah. That's.
So what?
Oh, sorry, Bill. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I mean,
No,
you've run into that yourself, I'm sure, right, Rick? Or in your travels.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Early on in business, and I see it happen all the time in my industry, and there's. I'm glad I got to know you to set me straight, so I don't have to make these mistakes. Because it's like you said,
Right.
and I know you're going to share that these are very common mistakes that either knowingly or willingly small business owners do make, and it's really important for them to understand what the consequences are of these things if you do
the consequences, yeah. And now, look, we're not going to talk so much about procedure in what you should do to protect yourself, like what you should establish, what entity, that kind of thing. We're going to talk about, regardless of what you're doing in your business, these things oftentimes come to the forefront. So let's take the first one right off the top, and that is the DIY guy, the do-it-yourself guy. This is the guy or gal who thinks they can get free legal documents on the internet, and that these documents are going to contain everything that they should contain, and that the wording and the language is going to be all appropriately phrased, and that you don't really need to understand any legalese, because if you just say it straight out, everything's going to be fine and dandy. Well, I'm here to tell you, and we're not going to mention any sites, but there are those sites out there that will do whatever you tell them to do. And in fact, a lot of them make it very clear that all they're doing is what you're telling them to do. So unless you have a legal degree, what you're telling them to do is only as valuable as what your knowledge is, and what you're instructing them on. So, let's take some typical examples. Well, you want a will. I'll give you a will. I'll give you a will. Man, you need a will, and you need it at this price. Well, how many times have we said that a will is valueless without a trust package? If you have a will, and only a will, and if you have no will, you're going to probate court. And you're going to be in probate court for 1, 2, maybe even 3 years, depending on the size of your estate and how crowded your court is. You're going to be spending money in probate court, and those lawyers are going to be, they're going to be raking it in. They like that stuff, so they're going to be able to take it from you when they need to.
That's interesting that you said that, because I think that's a misperception out there that if you have a will, then you're okay, but disconnected from a trust. That's an interesting point, because I think it's commonly understood that a will protects myself, right?
The only distinction between a will and not having a will is if you don't have a will, it passes by what's called intestate succession. And that means naturally to your heirs, without getting into more specifics, because I don't want this show to become an estate planning show today. If you have a will, it just says you still got to go to probate court, but it says who is going to get what, as long as the will's not contested. It's a far different situation with a trust. You need to have a trust because you're going to avoid probate. So same type of thing applies, Rick, when you've got a guy who wants to do a corporation, or you got a guy who wants to do an LLC. Now, there are sites out there that you can sign up for. Do you know what you want? Do you know what's particular to your business? Are you going to spend the money to get an operating agreement to go with your business, or aren't you? Are you going to make sure that that operating agreement is fact-specific toward the type of business that you conduct? Are you going to understand that all of the provisions are in there that require you to be aware of how your business is going to go or pass should something happen to you, or should you want out, how the business is going to be dissolved? These are things that people want to try on their own. And look, I'm the last person to sit here and tell you that if you're not an intelligent guy or gal, you can't read and get up to speed on things, and try to do this yourself. But if I've got a major plumbing issue, I'll be darned if I'm going to start tackling under the sink, taking the pipes apart and trying to figure out how to do this myself. I'm going to call a plumber. You're going to plunge into a deep river of you-know-what if you don't have somebody who you can go to and get some legal expertise. Don't do the intricate things yourself, or at least don't do them without somebody you can turn to and get some advice on. Then if you feel you can tackle it, try to go ahead after using that approach. But the strictly do-it-yourself person, there's limitations, because frankly you just simply can't trust what is out on the internet. And that's the biggest factor. You don't know you're going to get what you pay for.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because it's so tempting.
Well, maybe a better way, Rick, frankly, is to say you will get what you pay for. You're only going to get, the price is going to be commensurate with the expertise that's behind the price.
Yeah, and it's so tempting for people to go out there and look for these legal documents, and the funny thing is, I've seen some of these things, especially in the photography industry, that are available out there that people suggest to use, and they're so laden with you got to know a whole different language, because they're just they're incomprehensible, because the words are so dated and so legalese that
Well, that's another thing, Rick. That's a good point, actually. Oftentimes they're not. However, if you get a do-it-yourself document that is laden with legalese, are you going to be able to understand it without the influence and the feedback of a lawyer? So you're on the wrong side of the fence no matter whether you get a document that's deficient and doesn't cover legally all the things you need to have covered, or it's so overladen with legalese that you don't have an understanding of it because you haven't spoke with a legal professional to be able to understand. It's one thing to get something in writing, but you need to understand what it is. You need to be able to say, okay, it's like the last several years we've had in the loan industry, right, where people will get these loans, they won't read their loan documents, they don't understand what their obligations are, although the loan documents are so long and fancy that they figure, okay, I'll just sign on the dotted line. Everybody else has taken care of all of this for me. What's the first thing that they should tell you to do? When you get a loan, you should have those loan documents examined by a lawyer. Pay a little extra money and go do it. You're protecting yourself in the long run. It's the old story, pay me now or pay me later. It's really up to you. That leads us into really the second thing that business owners don't always do. They're very trusting and they're old school, and they say, okay, we have an oral agreement to do business. Let's have a handshake. Yeah. Let's see how binding oral agreements are when you go to try to prove up whatever it is you've supposedly agreed on when you get to the courthouse steps. You can have a rock solid deal which can dissolve quickly and put you on the losing end if you don't get your agreements in writing. Okay. You need to do. There was a time, Rick, when I remember we used to work as lawyers on a handshake many years ago, and between lawyers now, even we want things in writing all the time because you never know what lawyer you can or cannot trust. So this is not relegated only to the general public, folks. Get whatever deal you're doing in your business in writing and make sure it's overseen by a competent attorney who can give you the best advice on how to put whatever it is you're going to do in writing. Okay?
So like on the golf course, a gentleman's handshake doesn't work in this case.
A lot of times on the golf course it doesn't even work. Yeah. Believe me, unless you're a hell of a putter, you could stand to lose a lot of money. So no, all kidding aside, I can't emphasize this enough. So if you're a do-it-yourself guy, you may not make the mistake of not getting it in writing, but then you're not going to get the competency behind the document that you need. You also could be a do-it-yourself guy who just does it, plays fast and loose and says, okay, I'm not even going to get what I'm going to do in writing. I'm going to do everything myself, and I'm going to do it by way of a handshake. You got to be very cognizant of this stuff, and I can't emphasize enough how much a writing is important, backed by the competent legal expertise that you need to interpret that writing for you and to make sure that protections are inserted in that document that's going to be best for the well-being of your business.
That's interesting where you're leading with this because I'm sure you have stories of or can incite examples of how this has backfired on the business owner without having the proper documentation because as a result of doing the DIY approach, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. War stories are abundant. In fact, I've often thought about writing a book. But then, of course, unless I was very vague, I'd have to go out and get waivers from all these clients to be able to give me permission to use their material. Remember that the whole goal of WFB Legal Consulting Incorporated is to keep you out of the courthouse, to keep you off of the courthouse steps. Many of these things I'm telling you today, we're discussing today, will put you on the courthouse steps because you haven't taken the time or invested the money and the time to be able to do it right. Anybody can get a splinter and take the splinter out with a sharp pin that they put over the fire for a few minutes, right? But that's vastly different than being able to enter intricate business deals or even simplistic business deals that you do on just a handshake and rely on the person's honesty to shine through should the deal go wrong. And the deal could go wrong by accident. There could be something that occurs that makes the deal go wrong that isn't intentionally made to go wrong by one party or the other. You have to be prepared for that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads us right into your own ballpark. Not just with outside vendors and creditors, Rick, but you need to stop playing fast and loose with employees if you have them. You need to have an employee handbook. What does that do? It tells your employees what their rights are. It tells you what your rights and obligations are. And it makes sure that that document, with all of the vast law that applies to employees today, and we're just to touch upon a few, we're talking about pay and the hours worked and the conditions of employment and withholding taxes and discrimination and OSHA, Cal OSHA. All of these things have to be covered, and that employee has to, again, do what? Sign for that document when he gets that handbook, and that puts him on notice that he knows his rights. We presume by the signature, the way it's worded, that he's read this information. We don't have to stand there and say read it and wait till he reads it. By his signature, it is presumed that he has read what's in it, that he knows what's in it, and that he knows what his obligations are as an employee. He knows as well what his rights are as an employee.
Mm-hmm.
So that's extremely important as well.
Yeah, and I know you talked about this in a particular episode, focusing really on
right.
employment law.
So, right, and we bring it up briefly here, Rick, because these are some real big mistakes, the common mistakes that business owners tend to make more and more. And remember, if you're at the beginning of your business and you're starting out a business and you start making the mistakes of not doing deals in writing or doing all of these deals yourself rather than having a competent attorney on your team, because we've talked about having an attorney, an accountant, and a marketing person on your team from day one in this show. If you do all of this stuff, well, it naturally follows that when you start in your business, if it gets bigger and you start bringing on employees, you're going to carry the same bad habits right over into your own backyard. And that's not going to be good for your business.
No, that's not good at all. Well, this is great information here, Bill. I know you have a couple of more points that you want to make that are going to be very. I think the audience is really going to take notice of this because they certainly don't want to be put in a situation where they make these mistakes as well. But before we finish up with those last points, we have another sponsor that we want to promote here on the show,
yes.
And that's Rick Regal, right, Bill?
Right, we do. Rick has been a sponsor of ours before on several occasions. He works at Edward Jones. And he is at 30110, that's 30110 Crown Valley Parkway, Suite 104 in Laguna Niguel, California, 92677. And Rick, is a real straight arrow. This guy will tell you how to invest your money, where to invest it, depending on the nature of the estate you're using, the assets you're using to invest, will always tell you, and by the way, he has monthly seminars that he does in various areas that will help your investments move along. He is the kind of guy who will say, here's what you need. You need an estate plan. You need an investment plan. You need your assets to be protected. He covers all the bases. Why do I say that? Not because he helps promote the things that I do, but because he is aware enough to give you those options and then leaves it up to you to make the decision which one of those you need. But he gives them to you, and he says, you really need all these. It's up to you. Are you going to be a DIY guy in some areas, or are you going to go out and get the things you need? You can reach Rick at the following number, 949 area code 249-8248. That's 949-249-8248. Rick Regal at Edward Jones in Laguna Niguel. Please give him a call.
That's awesome. All right, so as we get into the back half of the show here, Bill has shared some very important tips on common small business legal missteps. What else should a business owner be aware of not to do?
Well, what they should always make sure they have, Rick, and this is common if a business starts to fail or if they decide they're not the two co-owners or co-founders or partners or whatever the case may be, may not be right for each other. They really need a buy-sell agreement that covers what will happen if one of them dies, becomes disabled, wants to sell, goes through a divorce. You never know. You know, a lot of things that are unexpected can happen in life. We all know that, but do we really think about it at the time we're running our business, especially if it's prosperous business, things are going along smoothly and we say, oh, this can't happen to us. But a buy-sell agreement can be very specific and should always be in place when you have the company implemented, and it can take the form of various provisions within an operating agreement if you have a formalized entity, or it can also be an adjunct to the business that is drawn up at the time that the sale is going to occur, as long as it incorporates the provision in the operating agreement for that business. So let me explain. If you have an LLC and you have an operating agreement, or you have a corporation and you have an agreement that basically states what the rights and obligations of each of the shareholders or members, if it's an LLC, what those rights and obligations are, that puts these members or these shareholders, depending on what entity you have, on notice of what their rights and obligations are. You then incorporate those notice provisions into a buy-sell agreement that's drawn up by a competent attorney at the time you're going to sell the business, or you have this provision already in place, which is what I like to do, in case someone dies unexpectedly and can't speak up for himself. You need to know how this business is going to function once that person is deceased, and many businesses just don't cover this. And the most obvious, Rick, would be many businesses don't have an agreement in place that even puts these people on notice as to what's going to happen, much less have a full blown out buy-sell agreement. You got to have this agreement in place, and you can do it. You can incorporate it by way of the operating agreement of the company, and then have the agreement drawn up later, and have the heirs of the person who's deceased sign that agreement, or if it's not a situation where one of them is deceased, then you have the agreement signed by the person who wants out of the business. So you need these agreements done, and I find it extraordinarily hard to comprehend the notion that someone can go online and go to a site and get these done. And I'm going to say right off the top, Rick, this really sounds like a big 30-minute advertisement for WFB Legal Consulting Incorporated and other business lawyers. But sometimes you got to be blunt and you got to be straightforward in a way that forgoes what it may tend to sound like. The audience needs to know that these things occur in business, that they're not good for business, and that they're going to be at a big disadvantage if they follow these bad practices that we're speaking about today.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, because folks, if you're listening to this show and you happen to be one of these people out there where you do have co-owners, co-founders, or partners in your not partners, but other people involved in your business that happen to be owners or co-founders, Bill, just in a nutshell, what would happen if one of these situations came about where one of them died, one of them got disabled, or wanted to sell, or for some reason they got divorced? What would happen in that case?
Well, if you don't have an agreement, remember, courts are very pro business owner. In other words, what I mean by that is they want business owners to have agreements in place so that they can run their business. Courts do not want to get involved in the dissolution of businesses unless they have to. And if you don't have an agreement, or there's two major points. If you don't have an agreement in place, or if you have an agreement and somebody wants to breach that agreement and not follow it, Those are the two main circumstances where a court is going to step in and say, okay, now I'm going to take the reins and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Courts don't typically like to do that. The Corporations Code, the LLC Act, the statutes in California are very liberal in letting you run your business as long as you have the appropriate agreements in place. They prefer a contract taking precedence over statutes. Statutory law will come in place only if they're forced to be exerted. So, and that leads us to the final point I'd like to make in the show today, Rick, and that is, I'm going to take this one step further, man. I'm going to go out really out on the limb, and I'm going to say that you should set an appointment with your attorney that you have on board in your business at least once a year, even if things aren't showing up as a red flag. Providing your attorney with a clear understanding of what you're doing in your business, whether you have plans to expand, whether you want to add new products, whether you want to enter a new territory or a market, whether you want to bring on new employees, what you want to do with your estate in the future. These are all things that an attorney can help plan ahead for. Look, I'm a big believer in preventative medicine, and I'm a big believer necessarily in preventative lawyering. You know, go and see your lawyer like you see your doctor, for God's sake. Go and see him and say, here's what I'm planning to do. If you don't trust your lawyer enough, if you haven't vetted him enough to give you the right deal, to be able to hone his skills on your particular business, to adapt his fees to what you can afford, then you don't have the right lawyer. You need to go find one. And all of these things come into play. And just what I've said, Rick, this is the perfect example of a business lawyer having the three-tier model that I have. Asset protection, see your lawyer about what you're doing in your business and how you need to continually be protected. Do you have your minutes done? Are you up to date on what you need to do on a yearly or biannual, excuse me, a yearly or every other year basis? Do you have your estate plan in place based on what your business is producing and what personal assets you have? Is it up to date? And are you bringing on these new employees? Are you expanding your business, new territory, new market? Do you have your employment issues on board? So employment issues, estate issues, asset protection issues all make up a competent business lawyer. And believe me, if you got the kind of lawyer that you should have, like myself, you can take your lawyer to lunch once a year to talk about your business, and he's not going to charge you for it. Okay?
Good point.
So these are things that you know, we like to interject with some fun here, but everything I've said is dead on accurate, and you need to if you are a proactive business owner, don't make these mistakes. Don't avoid your lawyer. Have a buy-sell agreement in place, especially an operating agreement. Don't play fast and loose with employees. Get agreements that you do in your business in writing, and please, please don't get hooked on the do-it-yourself approach. Okay? I can't stress that enough.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
I hope this has been helpful to our listeners and viewers, Rick. You know, there's a lot of lawyers out there, and I'll venture to say there's a lot of competent lawyers out there. So this isn't just a ad for WFBLC. This is an ad for you to do the right thing in your business, because, as we've always said from day one of our show, Rick, we're here to help the entrepreneur, the small business owner, and even the expanding business owner. We're here to help educate them so they can make the right decisions along the way and make their business prosperous.
That's right. If for our listeners out there, if you are in a situation where you are currently implementing one of these mishap steps that we just talked about, and you want to do the right thing and prepare yourself or protect yourself, like Bill said, there are competent lawyers out there, and there's some not so competent lawyers out there, but you definitely want to go with a guy who really is knowledgeable in business law, like Bill. It's it's amazing because Bill's a great guy that you can communicate with. He's a good guy to get advice from. So if you are in need of small things to protect yourself in this case, Bill, what's the best way to get a hold of WFB?
Well, you can certainly go to wfblegalconsulting.com. All the information will be there, but more specifically, email bill@wfblegalconsulting.com, and my two phone numbers are 949 area code. One is 413-6535, 413-6535, and the other one is 698-6222. That's 698-6222, and I'll be happy to help you in any way I can.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that concludes our episode today on the common small business legal missteps. Bill, that was great information. And sometimes,
thank you.
Sometimes the obvious is not so obvious when you're looking the other way. So I'm glad you took the time to talk about these things because they're very important and could be very hazardous not only to your health but to your business, right?
That's certainly true. I can't emphasize that enough. Well, we'll look forward to seeing everybody next week for another great show. We want to wish you a very prosperous week as we head into hopefully a little bit, continued nice weather here in the Southland. And until next time, feel free to give us a call. Rick is going to give you the ways you can get a hold of the show as at the close here, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you next week. And Rick, how can they get a hold of us on the show?
That's great. If you have any feedback or would like to be a sponsor on the show, or even just want to feedback some topics, future topics that you'd love to hear us speak about, drop us a line at bottledbusinesssenseshow@gmail.com, or you can even touch us through social media at the same handle, or on Twitter at bbsense on Twitter as well, and we'd be happy to take a look at what you'd like us to say. And your feedback is very important to us because we take your information and really shape this show around what you have to say and what you like to hear about. So
that's right.
With that, Bill, excellent show again. Looking forward to next week's show as well. And with that being said, everyone have a great week and have a prosperous week as well.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. See you next time. All right.